All right, so ready to ditch the old business playbook.
I'm all for it.
Today, we are diving into Rework. This book, it throws out so much of that traditional business advice. It's a breath of fresh air.
And it's not just some random, self-help, businessy book.
Right.
This comes from Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson.
The Basecamp guys.
Yeah, the creators of Basecamp, Ruby on Rails, they've actually done this stuff.
Exactly, and that's why we wanted to do a deep dive on this. These guys, they built a crazy successful company, and they did it their own way. And what we're going to unpack today is how you can apply some of that unconventional wisdom, whether you're running a company, working on a side project,
right,
whatever it is.
And I think one of the biggest things that holds people back is just the fear, right? Like 9 out of 10 businesses fail. You hear that statistic all the time.
Oh, yeah. That's enough to make anyone, want to go back to their 9 to 5.
Absolutely. I'd crawl back under the covers.
Exactly. But what do Fried and Hansson say about that? They say, forget the statistics.
Yeah.
Forget them. Those numbers, they're irrelevant to you.
Okay.
Your business, your journey, that's what matters. And the business world has changed. Technology.
Yeah.
It's leveled the playing field.
They talk about making a dent in the universe,
Yeah.
right? Even on a small scale.
Yeah, making a dent in the universe. And they use the example of Craigslist.
Oh, interesting.
Which is so funny to think about, but think about it. This massive classified ad industry.
It's huge.
And Craigslist comes in, tiny team.
Yeah.
Completely disrupts it.
Yeah.
And they didn't set out to build a billion-dollar company. They just focused on solving a problem.
Filling a need. And that leads us to, I think, another really important point from the book. Action over everything.
Okay.
Don't get stuck in planning.
Right.
Don't get stuck strategizing. Start building something.
So it's like they say, just dive in head first.
Yeah.
They dove in head first with Basecamp. It's not like they had this 5-year plan.
And they embraced constraints, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, but they talk about using like a thick Sharpie when you're designing something.
Interesting. Okay.
Focus on the big picture, the core idea. Don't get lost in the details.
Find the epicenter of the idea.
Yeah.
Love that.
And that kind of ties into this idea of building half a product, not a half-assed product.
Okay.
So do a few things really, really well.
It's like that story they tell, I think it's in the book, about the sandwich shop that closes when they run out of bread. And it would be so easy to just run out and get more bread, but
right.
They're committed to the quality.
Right.
That's it. When it's done, it's done. And that's okay.
And I think that's such a good point, and you don't see that very often.
Right.
It's like this commitment to, like you said, quality, to those few things, doing them really well.
You don't see that very often.
Yeah.
And it does take guts to, be okay with, okay, that's it. We're done. We're good.
Especially in the business world, right? Where it's all about more, more, more.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that kind of leads into another area where I think Rework really challenges us to think differently, and that's decision making. Like Fried and Hansson, they are all about making quick decisions. Don't get stuck in that analysis paralysis.
Right. They have that whole thing about how they delayed their affiliate program for Basecamp for so long. Yes.
Because they were trying to come up with this perfect system.
Yeah, they were worried about what happens with automated payments and foreign tax laws.
Oh my God.
And all this stuff that really wasn't necessary in the beginning.
Right.
They were making it way too complicated.
And then they realized, you know what? We can launch a simplified version. We can get it out there. We can refine it as we go. And it's fine.
Exactly.
So much better.
Exactly. And that's a perfect example of another big idea from the book. Embracing obscurity.
Embracing obscurity. Okay, so tell me more about that, because at first glance, it sounds like, why would you ever want to be obscure?
Right. Like hide in a corner. But it's actually brilliant. So when you're small, right, when you're just starting out, nobody really knows who you are.
You're under the radar. You're under the radar. And that's your time to make mistakes. You have the freedom to experiment.
Because the stakes aren't as high.
Exactly. You're not under the microscope. So you can iterate quickly. You can figure things out.
I love that.
And they use this great example in the book of test markets. Like how Dunkin' Donuts will test out a new donut.
Right. In a few stores.
Exactly. They don't just launch it nationwide, right?
Right.
They test it out. They get feedback, maybe tweak the recipe a bit.
Make sure it's a hit.
Exactly. So what would you say to someone who's just starting out and they have this pressure? Because there's so much pressure, especially online, to have this big launch, to have 1 million followers on day one.
It's like you have to come out of the gate, guns blazing.
Right. And Rework is like, nope, just chill. Embrace that obscurity.
I love that.
Use that time to really like hone your craft, connect with your audience.
Yeah, perfect your product, whatever it is.
Exactly. And that ties into another area where Rework really flips the script. Marketing. Like, forget those big, flashy ad campaigns.
Right. They're not about that.
No, not at all. They're all about building an audience organically.
They're all about content, right?
Yes.
Like building a loyal following by sharing your expertise. And it's clearly working. I mean, look at their blog.
Right. Signal versus noise.
Like so many people follow that.
Yeah, it's a huge resource. And it just shows the power of consistency,
Yeah.
Just showing up, providing value.
Authenticity.
Yes. And then there's that line from the book that always makes me laugh, where they talk about emulating drug dealers.
Yes.
When it comes to marketing, of course.
Disclaimer. Not actually advocating for anything illegal.
Right. But it's such a good analogy, right?
Yeah.
It's about giving away something so good, so valuable for free that people are like, I need more of this.
Hook 'em.
Yeah.
That's like that bakery giving away, the free samples.
Exactly.
Oh, that's good. I'm going to need to buy a whole loaf of this.
Exactly. So think about it. Valuable content, a free trial, a sneak peek behind the scenes.
Give them a taste.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about starting small, embracing constraints, quick decisions. What about building a team? Because Rework has some pretty unconventional advice on hiring as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. They're big believers in do it yourself first. Like before you even think about hiring someone for a role, try doing it yourself.
I love that. Figure out if you actually need to hire someone.
Right. And you gain such a better understanding of the work itself.
Yeah.
And then you'll be able to hire much more effectively. And I think it also creates a culture of, everyone pitches in.
It reminds me of how at Basecamp, they talk about how everyone, even the founders, they do a bit of everything.
Exactly.
Which is so cool. Okay, so doing yourself first.
Yeah.
What else? What about like resumes and qualifications? Because they're not afraid to throw out the rule book on that either.
Resumes, they can be so deceiving.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's easy to, make yourself sound good on paper, but they encourage looking beyond those formal credentials.
Yeah.
Look for critical thinking skills, problem solving.
Can they communicate?
Exactly.
Can they write?
Oh, they're huge on that. They actually say you should hire great writers for any position.
Which is so important. And it's funny because you don't always think about that, how important writing is no matter what you do.
Yeah, they have the saying, clear writing, clear thinking.
I love that.
If you can write well, it means you can organize your thoughts. You can get your point across. And that's valuable in any role, any job.
Right. It shouldn't just be like relegated to the marketing department.
Exactly.
Everybody should be able to write well. Okay, so I love that Rework emphasizes this idea of building like a humane and sustainable work environment.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's okay to have a life outside of work. What a concept, right?
Right. It's like they're pushing back against that whole always-on mentality. Like you don't have to be hustling 24/7.
All the time.
It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to unplug.
Yes.
And I think that's really refreshing, especially in today's world.
It's so important. Okay, so we talk about that, like having a life outside of work. What about mistakes?
Yeah.
Because we all make them.
Oh, yeah.
But it's how you handle those mistakes that really matters.
Absolutely. And Rework encourages this honesty, this transparency that honestly you don't always see in the business world.
Yeah, you don't.
Not at all. Look, they have this great line, own your bad news.
Yeah.
Like if something goes wrong, don't try to hide it.
Don't sweep it under the rug.
Exactly.
Because it's always going to come out anyway.
It always comes out. So just be upfront about it. Tell your customers, tell your team.
And they use that example of like the Exxon Valdez oil spill.
Oh, yeah.
Where, they tried to downplay it. They tried to avoid responsibility.
Total disaster.
And it just made everything so much worse.
So much worse.
And then they contrast that with like the chairman of Ashland Oil.
Okay, yeah.
And he had a similar situation,
Right.
but his response was totally different. He flew to the scene. He took responsibility. He talked to the media.
Wow.
Yeah. What a difference.
Huge difference. And I think that just goes to show how you respond to a crisis.
Right.
It's just as important as the crisis itself.
Right. Because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's all about how you deal with it.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Rework, it really is a call to action. It challenges us to rethink, so much about how we work, how we build businesses, how we can find that success, but also how we can find some fulfillment along the way.
Yeah, and it's about simplifying things, getting rid of that unnecessary complexity, focusing on what truly matters.
And building something that works for you.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
Exactly.
So as you go back to your work, your projects, your own ventures, ask yourself, what are you going to rework today?